Morning, everybody. Morning, good morning, good morning. Sad day, right? Sad day here in Philadelphia. Um, my friends at Parks Casino, very appropriately, Parks Casino being just 20 minutes from the site of last night's tragic plane crash in Northeast Philadelphia. And a lot of Parks customers and employees live in the affected area. They offer Parks Casino their thoughts and prayers to the victims, to their families, and the entire Philadelphia community affected by this tragedy. They also extend heartfelt thanks to the first responders on site for all of their efforts. Thank you, Parks, for allowing me to say that. The Northeast, right? The great Northeast. I get it. We're reaching an audience here that extends far beyond the environs of Philadelphia, but for those of you who are not from Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, it's not the Northeast. It's always been the Great Northeast. Why is it the Great Northeast, by the way? I grew up in Bucks County, and Bucks County abuts Northeast Philadelphia. Consequently, over my years, I've spent a lot of time in Northeast Philadelphia. And I'll say this, it's funny, I was just having this conversation with one of my sons, and I was telling him that his generation is lost without GPS and a phone and Waze to tell them how to get around. And one of the greatest experiences for me when I was younger was running political campaigns. Two in particular. One was an Arlen Specter U.S. Senate race, and my responsibility was the city of Philadelphia. And then a Frank Rizzo mayoral race, in which I was political director. And there's nothing that acquaints you with a geographic area like a campaign, because there's no GPS that is going to run a campaign and let you know where people reside. Anyway, by virtue of each of those campaigns, I have over the years also, an additional reason, spent a lot of time in Northeast Philadelphia and have gotten to know its neighborhoods and its enclaves and the different composition, although it has changed over the years. It's the boulevard, right? You wouldn't say the Roosevelt Boulevard. It's funny, I was watching all the accounts last night as people were talking about the Roosevelt Boulevard, and I'm hearing Cotman, and I'm hearing Bustleton, all the arteries that we all know who are from this area. So just 2 days after what happened in Washington, to have this happen in Northeast Philadelphia is sad and it's stunning. And I have to say, and I'm not saying this with disrespect to the 6 lives lost, the pediatric patient. I think we all know the background on this case, and I have it in front of me, the very latest. But it's a miracle if the fatalities are 6. And let me just say, for the benefit of people who aren't from this area, this is one of the most densely populated portions of the city. It's row homes, and there's a mall which is on the boulevard, which is just a hub of activity. And as much as I'm reading and watching, I'm still not clear exactly what was the location of impact and how could there have been impact without killing people on the ground. And fingers crossed that that's the way that it remains. But if you said to me, and by the way, I have also flown from Northeast Philadelphia Airport on several occasions. And as a matter of fact, when I was practicing law, my mentor was the late, great, by the way, I apologize, but I don't really apologize if this is a little Philly and PA centric, but this is a big story and it's a national story. And I mean, look at that. It's like Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Northeast Philadelphia Airport, where I have flown on several occasions, when I was practicing law, my mentor, my boss, was the late, great James E. Beasley. He was a pilot, and he flew vintage World War II aircraft, and he had a hangar of his own at that airport. It's like a little clubhouse for Jim, and I flew with him out of Northeast Philadelphia Airport. If you said to me, Michael, a plane is going to take off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport, it's going to be in the air for less than a minute and come down, how many fatalities do you think there'd be on the ground? I would say a lot, unless it ended up in the Delaware. So, yeah, I mean, there are people who are being treated for injuries, but at this time, as I know it, no other known fatalities. A medical jet with 6 people on board, including a pediatric patient, that's just doubly sad, crashed Friday evening near the Roosevelt Mall in Northeast Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia Inquirer, erupting into a massive fireball, scattering debris throughout the streets and setting multiple homes and cars ablaze in a devastating scene. In a briefing Friday night, Mayor Sherrell Parker said there was no official number yet for how many people may have been killed or injured from the crash, but asked for the city's prayers and called the situation all hands on deck. And then it goes on from there. 6 patients being treated at Temple University's Jeans campus in the Northeast. 3 of the patients treated and released. Another 3 remained. Learjet 55 departed from the Northeast just after 6 p.m. and crashed moments later near the mall. The aircraft was en route to Springfield Branson National Airport in Missouri. Flight logs show that the plane was in the air for only a minute before it crashed. At the time of the crash, light rain and fog were in progress, with visibilities lowered to 5 to 7 miles. So Godspeed to all those affected by the tragedy last night in Philadelphia. Yeah, sad. And again, Parks Casino, thank you for your thoughts and prayers and recognizing that a number of your employees and a lot of folks who are your customers come from the affected area. And I appreciate Parks saluting the first responders. So, in other air tragedy news, the lead story today at Smerconish.com, when the newsletter comes out within the next 10 minutes, the headline is going to be, no, comma, Joe Ellis was not the helicopter pilot. And if you heard me on radio yesterday recount this whole story, it is worthy of a book, just because it is such an insight into what used to be whisper down the lane, limited to how many people could converse with one another. Now, in an age of high-speed internet, how someone's reputation could be so tarnished in a split second. The short version is that Joe Ellis was the digital media manager for Smerconish.com up until I guess about a year ago. For those of you who were at the unconvention, Joe was there. Joe Ellis has been in the Virginia National Guard for 15 years, comes from a military family, has served her nation well, very prideful and patriotic about her service. Joe is transgender, wishes to continue to serve her country. And when President Trump signed an order directing Secretary Hegseth to come up with a way to preclude the transgender community from serving the country, I reached out for Joe and I said, hey, would you be comfortable in coming on radio and talking about your experience? Answer, yes. Question from me, hey, do you want to write an essay for Smerconish.com on the day of your appearance on radio? Yes, I would. So Joe wrote an essay. I just have to sort of explain this to you in terms of how it all played out. Joe wrote an essay that if you haven't read it, you must, at Smerconish.com. I've had symptoms of what I now know to be gender dysphoria since I was 5 years old. I learned early to hide these symptoms from my family because I thought they meant I was a bad person. This led to healthy and not so healthy coping mechanisms. I thought that I could just be more religious, more successful, more manly, that I could cure my condition. I got married. I bought a house. I helped raise a stepdaughter, played drums in the church band, adopted a dog, all the things I believe a good man should do. And I really wanted to do those things, but I also secretly hoped it would fix me. It didn't work. So Joe wrote this very personal essay for Smerconish.com and then was my guest on Wednesday. And then Wednesday night, the events happen in Washington, the catastrophe, the helicopter, and the commercial airliner. And Thursday, President Trump has that press briefing and throws a DEI smart bomb into the mix. And somehow now, the combination of those factors, and TC had an interesting simplistic theory that someone then went looking for, Black Hawk helicopter, Army, transgender, and comes up with the essay that Joe had written for Smerconish.com, and then in some sick and twisted way just floats the idea that Joe was the helicopter pilot. And once the story ran, which I think was this publication, not even going to name them, but you can see the headline. And there she is. And, trans pilot Joe Ellis, rumored to be Black Hawk pilot in fatal collision over Potomac. It just took off like wildfire. There is a story in the New York Times about this, which says that on, was it Thursday or Friday? I guess it would have been yesterday, Friday, that Joe was the number 2 trending subject in the United States. I don't even know what number 1 was. And all of these stories were vicious stories. Another one of them said that it was a murder-suicide. That creating this idea that Joe had some hatred for Donald Trump and wanted to kill, as many people as possible and kill herself at the same. I mean, it is sick beyond belief. Sick beyond belief. And I believe it's all because I don't think that Joe, having come on my radio show, having written the essay, would have been subject to any of this had President Trump not Thursday morning blamed it all on DEI. And by the way, to get to today's poll question, I believe that it was deliberate. Now, this is my theory, and I'm sticking to it. I believe that Trump talking DEI was deliberate so as to detract attention from the Gabbard, Kash Patel, and Robert F. Kennedy hearings. That was his shiny object. He flashed DEI on the day that all 3 of those hearings were taking place. All 3 of those hearings were taking place. And that just ate up all the oxygen in the room. So now you had the combination of the DC crash, DEI, the twisted speculation. Here's the CNN coverage. And, from a good place, getting it right. A trans National Guard pilot was falsely accused of flying the helicopter in the fatal plane collision. Nuts, just absolutely nuts. But I worry about people with short attention spans getting all their news from just, one media silo. busy, maybe, and walking around today thinking that, oh yeah, it was a trans pilot. And now let me bring this all home for you. Have you noticed, and we'll have this story in the newsletter today, have you noticed that the Army has identified 2 of the 3 helicopter pilots from the Black Hawk, and the third is a female, deceased, and the family doesn't want her name released? Why don't you think they want her name released? I'll tell you why they don't want her name released. It's because of this treatment. It's because of what happened to Joe. So yesterday was a rather remarkable radio program, because as I was saying the things that I wanted to say and covering the ground that I wanted to discuss, TC was 10 feet away from me texting with Joe the updates about this insanity. And when we finally got our heads wrapped around it in the second hour of the program, we laid it all out. So, yeah, so there's that. Anyway, vote please today on the poll question at Smerconish.com. Do you think that Donald Trump deliberately dropped the DEI smart bomb as a diversionary tactic from the hearings that day on Capitol Hill? I do. It's going to be complicated to do the CNN program today because there are a lot of moving parts, and there might be a live press conference from Philadelphia just as I'm coming on air. So can I ask, please, for some likes? And if you've not subscribed, please subscribe and set yourself up for notifications. Joe is going to be my guest on CNN. Joe has not appeared anywhere. This is a national story getting huge attention, even against the backdrop of all the other news, but no one has heard Joe. But she will be with me today on CNN. So looking forward to that. Okay, I better get back on schedule. Have a wonderful day. Prayers for the folks in Northeast Philadelphia. So sad. Thank you, Parks. See ya.